Introduction. Our main character is a free-spirited boy. He considers himself to have an unusual mind, with a hobby of reading the Encyclopedia of Murderers. Suddenly, some classmates start chatting nonsense nearby, making his ears ring with noise. Immediately, he stands up, pulls out a knife from his pocket, and takes them down. But of course, that was just his imagination. Ichikawa always thinks of himself as a bloodthirsty monster who loves killing. And the person he wants to kill the most, right now, is a girl named Yamada. She is the #1 beauty in the school, and also a famous magazine model. Ichikawa simply wants to see that beautiful face twisted in agony. Suddenly, he jolts in surprise. She caught him secretly staring at her. Immediately, he turns away. He curses under his breath. He is determined to make her regret it, for daring to look at him with those eyes, so that once she becomes a corpse, Yamada's entire beautiful body will belong to him alone. This is the thought that appears in Ichikawa's mind every night. Lunchtime is always noisy and bustling. That's why Ichikawa always seeks out his own quiet, secret hideout, and that place is the library. But strangely enough, today Yamada appeared there. Her mouth was still full of rice. Yet she still tried to say something. "Come on, please swallow before you speak," Ichikawa just mumbled in response, even though he didn't understand what she had just said. But at that moment, he realized, this is a great chance to kill Yamada. But thinking it over, maybe it still wasn't the right time. So Ichikawa decided to observe a little longer. She had just finished eating a rice ball, yet now she pulled out a giant bag of snacks to eat next. With a face full of pure happiness and satisfaction, she munched while humming a tune and tapping her fingers on the table. Just like a gorilla, Ichikawa's face turned slightly red. He couldn't understand what was wrong with this girl. He decided to calm himself down by looking through the Human Anatomy Diagram book while thinking of ways to kill her. But he couldn't help his curiosity when he saw Yamada pulling out some papers to work on a sociology presentation. For some reason, she didn't bother making a rough draft, so she ended up running out of space to write yet now. She had that same satisfied expression as if nothing was wrong. That is what's really annoying, seeing Yamada looking for a box cutter. Ichikawa instinctively reached into his pocket and took out his knife. But then he suddenly froze, thinking to himself, if I lend it to her, I'll be seen as a weirdo carrying a weapon around. But looking over, Yamada is actually planning to tear the paper with her bare hands. With no other choice, Ichikawa reluctantly took out his knife and awkwardly handed it to her. Receiving a "thank you" from Yamada made Ichikawa's face instantly turn bright red. He quickly retreated, screaming internally. For some reason, seeing Yamada using his knife gave Ichikawa a strange feeling deep inside. As soon as the lunch bell rang, signaling the end of the break, she casually put the knife into her pencil case and left. Just as she stepped out the door, her best friend blocked her, accusing her. "You were secretly snacking by yourself, weren't you?" Yamada immediately protested. "I wasn't eating at all." Right after saying that, she rushed toward Ichikawa, realizing there were still some crumbs left. She quickly stuffed them all into her mouth, while shoving the empty snack wrapper into Ichikawa's hand. Just like that, she successfully avoided getting caught by her friend. Now back in the room, Ichikawa was about to throw the wrapper into the trash, but then he hesitated. Instead, he held onto it for a while. And just like that, Ichikawa's weapon remained in Yamada's hands for an entire day. The next morning, when he arrived at class, he saw the knife placed neatly on his desk. He suddenly noticed it was still warm, thinking to himself, did she really hold onto it all night? She must have done this just to make sure I wouldn't have the chance to act. But then another thought crossed his mind. How does Yamada even know where I sit in class? Today was the day for group presentations. Since Yamada's work was too messy, one of her friends redid the entire thing. Upon hearing that, Ichikawa felt really annoyed. She had worked hard on that presentation, but Ichikawa believed that girl was just jealous of Yamada's beauty. However, the truth was, Yamada's work was still covered in chocolate stains, so throwing it away was actually the right call. Even though she seemed to accept it with a cheerful attitude, when it was time to present, Ichikawa noticed that her face had completely lost its usual energy. As expected, Yamada actually cared a lot about it. Even when Ichikawa's group was presenting, he kept glancing over at Yamada. and he saw that she was on the verge of tears. Over something so trivial. Thinking back, the way her face had lit up while working on that project. It showed that she never took it lightly at all. Suddenly, a helicopter flew past. The entire class got curious and turned to look out the window. But Ichikawa was afraid that Yamada's tear-streaked face would be noticed. In a panic, he quickly grabbed the box cutter and sliced up his own group's presentation. Just to distract everyone, using the excuse that they had already finished presenting anyway. But when he turned back to check on her, she was just staring at the helicopter with her best friend. And she wasn't even crying. During break time, Yamada had a habit of sitting on her tiny best friend's lap. But when it was her friend's turn to sit on Yamada, she would immediately cry out. Too heavy. The guys watching this scene couldn't help but have certain thoughts. They even imagined that her friend, in a movie setting, would be Yamada's boyfriend, which was honestly just shameless. Ichikawa got so mad he wanted to kill that perverted idiot on the spot. Only one round-headed guy had a slightly different opinion. He preferred girls with a style like Hara's. So, they were immediately judged by those two as having a different kind of taste in women. At lunchtime, Ichikawa stopped by the library and happened to meet Yamada. But today, it wasn't just her, Hara was also there. Because someone had arranged for her to come. Yamada happily invited Hara to have a snack with her. But Hara was on a diet, as she felt her body didn't look good in the eyes of others. On the other hand, Yamada would eat whatever she wanted without any restrictions. Suddenly, Kanzaki walked in. It turned out he was the one who had invited Hara there. Ichikawa suddenly remembered the earlier conversation, and realized that Kanzaki was probably planning to confess. However, Yamada was too carefree, not understanding the atmosphere, and continued to stay, hindering things. When she heard them talking about dieting, Kanzaki encouraged her. You see, chubby girls are also very cute. But it seemed that Hara still wasn't convinced. So he continued. I really like chubby girls. Even if they weigh over 100 kilograms. It's fine. At that point, Yamada finally realized, and understood she was being a third wheel. Ichikawa was so focused on watching that he accidentally dropped a book. Attracting everyone's attention, Yamada glanced over at him, and intentionally coughed lightly. Ichikawa immediately understood that she was signaling him to pretend to be a cat with no other choice. He embarrassingly meowed once. Yamada took the opportunity and made an excuse to check the books, in order to give the other two some privacy. But instead of leaving, she hid and watched along with Ichikawa. Not only that, she was foolish enough to meow once more. Just to be sure, unexpectedly, Kanzaki and Hara took it seriously, continuing their two cats performance, which only made the situation more humorous. While they were still arguing, the two outside were listening with delight. They hadn't expected the atmosphere to develop so well. Kanzaki and Hara eventually left the room, still chatting happily. Yamada sighed with relief and said goodbye to Ichikawa. It was only then that he felt embarrassed for helping her out today. After school, on his way home, Ichikawa passed by the bookstore and suddenly remembered that Yamada had mentioned she appeared in this month's fashion publication. But thinking about it, his current outfit seemed a bit inappropriate for the bookstore. So he decided to change into something more stylish before going inside. After finding the magazine with Yamada's photo, Ichikawa was startled to realize that she had just arrived. He quickly hid in a corner to observe. At that moment, two girls picked up the magazine to look at it. But Yamada deliberately tried to attract attention, as if she wanted to show off that she was the person in the magazine. This caused the two girls to panic, decide not to buy it, and leave. In fact, Yamada even placed her magazine out front, then took out a pen as if she was waiting for someone to ask for her autograph. However, right after that, the bookstore employee neatly returned the magazine to its original spot, causing her to walk off in defeat. Seeing this, Ichikawa decided to buy the magazine, telling himself that it was a way to make up for the two girls earlier. He also picked up a horror novel and went home, beginning to flip through it. When he reached the page with Yamada, he closely examined the photos of her, feeling as though he was looking at a completely unfamiliar person. Afterward, he tossed the magazine into the trash. But just a few seconds later, he thought, it feels a bit wasteful to throw it away without reading it. So, Ichikawa picked the magazine back up. In the end, That magazine kept him awake all night, tossing and turning. The next morning, as he was riding his bike to school, Ichikawa was stunned to see Yamada walking to school with a guy. But after thinking about it, this seemed reasonable. He sadly got off his bike and walked it when he reached the red light. But as he got closer, he realized that they didn't know each other at all, and the guy was just trying to flirt with Yamada. Whether Yamada did this on purpose or by accident, but she pretended to be innocent, saying that she didn't know what social media was. She even claimed that she communicated with her friends through brainwave frequencies, meaning they could read each other's thoughts. But the guy wasn't giving up, immediately flirting. "Do you know what I'm thinking right now?" Yamada responded right away. "You want to eat ice cream, right?" This made him laugh. But in his mind, he thought, "You're really cute." However, Yamada didn't seem to care at all, only reacting when she was complimented as funny. It seems like she really likes it when someone calls her humorous. The conversation between them became more intimate, causing Ichikawa to feel pain in his heart with every passing moment. Then, suddenly, the guy became serious, immediately asking for Yamada's line address. He even grabbed her hand and moved closer, applying pressure, which made her want to walk away. But when her hand was held, she had no choice but to take out her phone, seeming ready to exchange contact information with him. Ichikawa told himself, "It doesn't matter," and slowly began to walk away. But in an instant, he decided to put all his strength into it and pedaled hard forward. And so, the bike shot past the fence and fell straight into the lake. The incident made both Yamada and the guy forget about exchanging line addresses, as they quickly rushed over to watch the scene. To their surprise, Yamada's best friend, Chihiro, had seen everything. She immediately started telling everyone that Ichikawa had thrown his bike into the lake. Yamada curiously asked, "Why did you do that?" Ichikawa made up a story on the spot. "I accidentally hit the gas instead of the brake." Hearing that, Yamada laughed heartily and remarked, "You're so funny." Just that one sentence was enough to make Ichikawa feel like his heart was stolen by her. Ichikawa always thought his mission was to end this world full of lies. And the library was the place where his terrifying power was sealed. It was clearly a place no one was allowed to enter. Yet, the most beautiful girl in school, the one he wanted to kill the most, was sitting here, eating candy and swaying to the rhythm with him. Suddenly, she stood up. It seemed like she needed water to eat the candy, but worried someone might steal her food. She quickly covered it up and ran off to find water. It took a while before Yamada came back. It seemed like she had spilled some water and ran off to get more. This made Ichikawa a bit suspicious. Sure enough, when he looked closely, he discovered that Yamada had spilled a lot of water on the floor. He quickly started cleaning it up, afraid the water might get onto the books. Just then, Yamada came back and said, "I'll clean it up later." Then she ran off again to get more water. Ichikawa thought to himself, why doesn't she just use a cup? Instead of catching every drop? He calculated that there were only 3 minutes left in the break. And the home economics room where the cups were was on the top floor, quite far away. In the end, he decided to run up there and get a cup for Yamada. But when he came back downstairs, he found that she had already finished. It turned out that the candy, when mixed with water, changed its color and flavor, making it even more delicious the more it was mixed. Ichikawa felt embarrassed for running up there for nothing, so he just poured himself a cup of water and drank it. The next time they met, Yamada unexpectedly gave him the remaining candy, even though the break was already over. In class, because it was so hot, Yamada's group of 4 took turns fanning each other. But Yamada did it very half-heartedly, with no real effort. Ichikawa wondered, she has so many friends, so why is she eating snacks alone? Could it be that Yamada is planning to assassinate me? Is she trying to lure me into the library and then finish me off? But just then, the heat made Yamada have to unbutton her shirt slightly to cool off, which led some darker thoughts to cross Ichikawa's mind. Suddenly, a guy sitting behind him whispered, "The chance to peek at her bra has come." Ichikawa jerked in shock, thinking they could read his thoughts. The guy behind him started executing his plan, pretending to walk by to sneak a peek. Ichikawa was determined not to let him do that, quick thinking. He flicked a utility knife onto the floor. The guy immediately bent down to pick it up, even checking to see if the knife had any scratches. Thanks to that, Ichikawa bought enough time for the girls to safely leave. Yamada's best friend, Chihiro, was a small girl, but she never let Yamada off the hook whenever she had to carry her on her back. But when it was Yamada's turn to carry her, Chihiro immediately refused. Today, Ichikawa met Yamada again in the library. He was focused on figuring out what her assassination plan was when he suddenly got startled by the moment their eyes met. Yamada unexpectedly spoke up. "Can I borrow your fan?" Ichikawa felt a bit embarrassed, but still moved closer to hand it to her. Suddenly, Yamada remarked, "This fan smells really nice," and then brought it close to her nose. Yamada sniffed it and then motioned for Ichikawa to come closer and smell it with her, which startled him. Left with no choice, he had to step closer, his face turning bright red, and smell it. But at that moment, Ichikawa's eyes were struck by the sight of Yamada wearing swimwear underneath. Quickly, he turned his face away, but suddenly, he received a call from Yamada's friend. Panicking, he crawled under the table and tapped the chair, signaling, "Sit down here and cover for me." It turned out that Chihiro was angrily looking for Yamada. Yamada's body temperature was too close, causing something to rise in Ichikawa, but not the kind of fighting spirit. The problem was that Yamada was too foolish, and accidentally bumped her head against the table, making a loud noise. Chihiro seemed to realize something, quickly sitting down and chatting with him, knowing that Yamada's appetite was incredibly bad. When visiting Chihiro's house, she even made an excuse to go to the bathroom, but in reality, she was snacking right in front of the room. However, that was exactly what Chihiro liked about her. Moreover, Yamada was very kind-hearted and had a good understanding of fashion. It seemed that the strategy of intentionally complimenting so the weapon could rise by itself had worked. Yamada touched Ichikawa's thigh to gain momentum to sit up, but she didn't know that almost made him eat 3 bowls of rice. Now, his hand was still covering something, while the other hand was placed right where she had just touched. As soon as they left, Ichikawa hurried to the bathroom. But whatever happened in there, everyone understands today is the school's cultural festival, and Ichikawa's class is making a haunted house. Now, the best way to get through this event is to make sure no one notices your presence. But suddenly, Yamada came over and asked, "Ichikawa, your drawings are really good, right? Can you draw something for us? After all, you always draw creepy things at home." So Ichikawa agreed, and even edited the drawing to make it look gloomier. But at that moment, what caught his eye was Hara's soul, making him wonder, is this the real deal? So he leaned in to get a closer look, but forgot that his face was way too exposed. Suddenly, Yamada popped out of the well to scare him, causing Ichikawa to jump, as if his own guilty conscience had just been exposed. Chihiro scolded Yamada, who would be scared by such a cute scare. After finishing the drawing and coloring, Ichikawa took the water bucket to dump it, but Yamada read the inscription on the tombstone, and it turned out to be her family name at that moment. Another friend also read it, and grabbed Ichikawa by the collar, accusing him, "You're the one who wrote this, right? Want to impress the girls?" Actually, this was written by Hara, but Ichikawa was afraid that if he told the truth, the girls would start arguing with each other, so he decided to take the blame. Shortly after, Hara came back, and hearing the story, she admitted she did it, because she had only written common surnames. Everyone read it carefully and realized that it was true, so the issue was resolved, and Hara had to erase everything. Returning to his work, Ichikawa was drawing when Yamada approached with a remorseful expression. She bowed her head to apologize and then left, causing Ichikawa to blush, not understanding what had just happened. When he looked back at the tombstones, he felt that they looked very fake without any writing on them. So he decided to write his family name on all of them to avoid any arguments. While washing his hands, Ichikawa still didn't understand why Yamada had apologized, when suddenly, she came up to him. "Do you want to add some blood to make it scarier?" She suggested he mix in some black to make it more realistic. Suddenly, Yamada tucked her hair behind her ear and leaned her face close to Ichikawa, making him freeze for a few seconds. Finally, feeling too embarrassed, he only dared to dab a small spot of blood on her cheek. Now, the cultural festival officially began. At this time, everyone was busy enjoying themselves. But Ichikawa was alone, as usual, so he planned to go home and play video games. when suddenly, the pervert from the other day, along with his friends, came over to invite Yamada's group to hang out, although he really disliked people like that. Upon thinking back, he remembered that the guy was the first to help him lift his bike when it fell. Therefore, he wasn't a bad person following them, but just happened to be blocked by a few people. Ichikawa had to go around a nearby classroom to catch up, but it seemed he had gone a bit too far. When Yamada saw him, she immediately separated from the group. Anyway, Ichikawa went into this classroom to see what the others were doing. On the desk was a map of the town from 80 years ago. This was the first place she wanted to find, a snack shop, but Yamada seemed very interested in this map, and even asked where Ichikawa's house was. Ichikawa sat down next to her and pointed out where his house was. At that moment, he realized that their houses were only 1 kilometer apart. Suddenly, a finger brushed against his hand, making Ichikawa jerk his hand back. Just as he was about to ask to take a picture of the map, Yamada grabbed his phone and took a selfie of the two of them. Actually, Ichikawa only intended to take a picture of the map, but somehow, he ended up with a priceless photo like that. So, he decided to keep the picture safe and occasionally look at it. Recently, Ichikawa had an idea for a book about an ordinary guy who is reincarnated and cursed by dark magic. He would take the lives of anything he touched. And here's his design for the female protagonist. In his mind, he thought she wasn't based on anyone. But why did he unconsciously think of Yamada like this now? It felt like hundreds of bugs were invading his skull. So Ichikawa decided to rest in the infirmary. He was startled when he noticed a pair of shoes with Yamada's name on the bed next to him. Just because of that, his body became hot, and his headache worsened. So, he told himself that it was probably just a boy with the same name. But he was shocked when the curtain was accidentally drawn back, revealing that it was his classmate Yamada. Realizing this was an opportunity to try an assassination, Ichikawa glanced at her. He noticed her skin was pale, like a corpse, but smooth and soft. Suddenly, Yamada opened her eyes, causing him to quickly turn his face away. But she was relieved, because it felt like a stranger had been looking at her. Fortunately, it was someone familiar. Yamada was here because she had a stomachache. Hearing that you had a headache, she pulled a pill from her pocket and handed it to you. Ichikawa took the pill and went to get a glass of water. Suddenly, he noticed the glass was wet. Realizing that Yamada had also drunk from this cup, he told himself that there was nothing strange about it. But when he brought it close to his lips, Ichikawa kept thinking about her lips having touched it. And then, he drank from it as well. After that, Yamada left but forgot her gym shirt. One hand really wanted to pick it up, while the other hand didn't allow it. It felt like there was a parasite controlling his arm to do something bad. In the end, Ichikawa managed to control the beast inside him and lay down to rest. But fate had a way of making things happen. And when the school nurse came, she threw the shirt at him and asked him to return it. This is just fate, okay? I have no ill intentions, also. Because fate was in play, Ichikawa was forced to inhale the pleasant fragrance. Clearly, gym shirts should smell like sweat. But why did this girl's shirt smell like flowers during break? He returned the shirt to Yamada. By chance, he saw her heading back to the infirmary to get the things she had forgotten. He thought she had discovered the shirt. But no, she only remembered the candy she had forgotten during break. Ichikawa was engrossed in writing his story, when he was startled by his friend behind him coming up with a game. Ask the girls if they want to go crab hunting. After playing rock paper scissors, Adaki lost, so he had to go to the girls to ask. But as soon as he saw their expressions, the young man became worried. So, he only dared to say that he wanted to check their health through their nails. However, he told his friends that the girls' nails were very short, so he was sure they had gone crab hunting before. Kanzaki denied it, but then guessed, maybe they used toys? It seemed the weird game was over. But unexpectedly, Adaki asked Ichikawa to give Yamada a letter for him. The main character thought the content inside must surely be the question. Do you want to go crab hunting? But with no other choice. He had to do it. He awkwardly handed the letter to Yamada and quickly walked away. When she opened the letter, she was very surprised. Inside wasn't any weird question, but a cute drawing of herself in a very adorable style. It turned out that Ichikawa had intentionally swapped Adaki's letter with the drawing he made and placed it on the desk. But when he read it, he realized that Adaki had only asked for her line address. Truly, a childlike crush back in class. This time Adaki came up with a game to test personalities. To guess the preferred relationship position of the other person. Of course, when talking to the girls, he only dared to say it was a personality test. So Ichikawa was very annoyed, deciding not to let him do such crude things. But then he thought again. And he also wanted to see Yamada's reaction. So what's the difference between me and them? The first game was to try and grab his fist with one hand. The way the opponent touches would show their decisiveness in battle. But Yamada just thought Adashonli wanted to touch their hands. So she firmly refused to do it. With no other choice, Adaki had to call 2 of his friends to be models to avoid suspicion. Kanzaki touched Adaki's hand from underneath, showing that he wanted to be in control from behind. This time it was the turn of the girls. But one of them quickly searched online and found that this game was just a perverted trick. Ichikawa felt a bit disappointed that he hadn't learned more about Yamada. Later, he went to the library and found a candy package on the desk. It must be hers. She was probably in the bathroom. A little while later, Yamada came back to check the candy package and found one piece missing. Immediately, she ran over to Ichikawa to grab his hand and check. But it turned out the candy was just forgotten in her pocket. However, based on what Ichikawa had heard earlier, this way of touching the hand from above meant she wanted to be in control and preferred the top position. Thinking that Yamada might be someone like that, so his face turned bright red and he lowered his head onto the desk. Now it's time for basketball class. The class divided into groups, each consisting of 5 people. Ichikawa was standing, deep in thought, about his mission to assassinate Yamada. But the image of her sleeping in the infirmary kept appearing in his head, distracting him. As a result, he was hit by a ball. It turned out that the throw came from Yamada. Frustrated, Ichikawa felt somewhat calm when he returned the ball. But he couldn't understand what the feeling inside him was at that moment. Strange emotions began to take over his mind. As he sat quietly in a corner, watching Yamada, he realized she was also looking at him. Carelessly, he was hit in the face by another ball. At that moment, Ichikawa was sure that they had just made eye contact. But unexpectedly, the collision actually hurt Yamada. It caused her nose to bleed a lot. He seemed unable to control his anxiety, immediately running after the teacher and his friends to the infirmary. There, at her feet, a trail of Yamada's blood soaked the ground. However, Ichikawa didn't dare to go inside directly, but crawled under the bed to secretly observe. At that moment, everyone began to leave the room to clean up and help Yamada's family come to pick her up. In a critical situation, he had to hide temporarily under the bed, and then started to blame himself. Why did I suddenly follow them in here? Now, Yamada's blood was flowing heavily, and tomorrow she had an important photo shoot. Yamada called her mother, crying loudly while apologizing. As her tears fell, Ichikawa couldn't help but cry too. He didn't understand why he was so moved. At that moment, Yamada accidentally dropped a card. Ichikawa looked down and was very surprised. The character I drew is being kept so carefully by her? Memories of the time they had spent together flooded back. Ichikawa realized that he had already fallen for Yamada. While the class was feeling down because of the incident, Adaki was happily picking up Yamada's blood-stained towel. Ichikawa angrily stood up, about to say something, but then he realized there was also a blood stain on his shirt. And when he tried to crawl out of the room, he stopped, deciding to sit back down instead. The next day, Yamada returned to school and was asked about the injury by many people. Chihiro decided to write the reason for her injury on the bandages so people wouldn't keep asking. Since yesterday, Yamada had been very scared because she was worried her injury wouldn't heal. And she started crying again. The photo shoot scheduled for today had been postponed, which made her mother and manager very disappointed. And yet, people blamed her. You're already in 8th grade, and you still get hurt like a little kid, and that was the thing that hurt Yamada the most. Indeed, she was much more mature than the others. After school, Ichikawa saw Yamada still standing on the stairs, crying alone, wiping her nose with all the tissues she had left. He immediately ran to the library, quickly placing 4 packs of tissues on the table so she could cry freely. But unexpectedly, she used the tissues to wipe her hands after eating some French fries after eating the snack. She smiled, and that was the Yamada Ichikawa knew. Now, Ichikawa was wondering, what does like mean? I think it's just a general feeling. It only means I don't dislike her. Not that I want to hang out with her. Anyway, love is a sickness of the heart, and it will ruin your life. So, he didn't want to get involved. At lunchtime, Ichikawa saw Yamada secretly hiding a milk carton in her bag, lying to her friends that she had drunk it all. Ichikawa thought she was secretly keeping stray dogs or cats. But it wasn't that. Turns out, she was saving the milk to bring to the library to make bujuk. When she was about to pour it into the milk box, Ichikawa immediately rushed out to stop her. He said, "There's a bowl in the home economics room." Yamada immediately asked him to go get it. And so, Ichikawa really ran off to get it. But it turns out she was just joking. And then decided they would go together. On the way, Ichikawa commented, "You like making complicated crafts like candy mixed with water." She laughed. "I've been into cooking lately." "Huh, calling that candy cooking? I can't believe you." They reached the domestic science room. But unfortunately, the door was locked. She turned around, intending to pour it into the milk carton instead. Then, they both had to go to the laboratory. Yamada reminded Ichikawa to keep quiet because there was someone in the next room. So he poured the food into the cup, carefully placing the weight on top to measure the water level precisely, to help her mix it. But when he realized there was no spoon to stir, Yamada grabbed Ichikawa's hand, dipped it into the cup, and fed him a bite. "Is it good?" she asked. The rest, she just shoved into her mouth. Truly, a food-loving person. Just then, a teacher walked by. Yamada jumped, choked, and knocked the cup over onto the floor. Ichikawa flustered and explained, "We left something behind, sir." But when she bent down to look, he realized that this forgotten item was quite strange. Afraid it might be misunderstood as something else, he decided to just admit it. "This is just food, sir." So both of them were scolded by the teacher. Back in class, while on duty, Ichikawa noticed that all day, a girl kept glancing toward Yamada. Then suddenly, that girl walked over, about to say something, but just then, Yamada dropped her towel down to the first floor. Zin still insisted that it wasn't intentional, even though Serena came to ask if she had apologized to her. She remarked that back in elementary school, Zin wasn't like this. Zin replied that it was Serena who had changed, not her, and walked away. During break time in the library, Serena noticed Zin was there too, probably to apologize. She was about to leave when unexpectedly Yamada called her back to show a photo app. She even invited both of them to take a picture together, though she really wanted to. Ichikawa reluctantly declined in pain to avoid being a third wheel. He ran out of the room, only to unexpectedly bump into Serena, who had been watching everything from the start. Yamada didn't know Zin's intentions, so she casually called her over to check out a face-swapping app. Serena, on the other hand, felt insecure, thinking that if they swapped faces, she'd look worse. So, the two of them took a picture together. Yamada said that she could make her face look even stranger, if it weren't for the injury on her nose. At that point, Zin finally apologized for hitting the ball into Serena's face. Yamada was surprised to learn about it now, but she didn't blame anyone and even took out some candy to offer to her friend. Flustered, she accidentally dropped all the candy. Serena then helped pick it up, and it seemed like they had made up. After Yamada left, Serena also apologized to Zin for scolding her all these days. At the same time, she turned to thank our male protagonist, which left him completely confused. In the end, everyone was worried about the nose of a model like Yamada, even though she herself didn't care much about it. By chance, they met in front of a convenience store. Yamada quickly ran over, complimenting Ichikawa's new car. While he felt like he was about to be triggered, she casually asked for a ride, leaving him flustered. Just as he was wondering, Yamada suddenly took out two Papakos, immediately breaking one in half, making Ichikawa unable to believe his life, that a girl was actually sharing candy with him. But don't forget, this is Yamada, the food lover, so she only shared a little bit stuck to the lid with him. On the way to take Yamada to the snack shop, Ichikawa realized she was lighter than he had thought. Yamada confided that she was about to leave the basketball club because she hadn't been practicing for a while. Knowing that Ichikawa had once been in the data handling club, she thought maybe she would try visiting there. But right after that, he fell silent because he wasn't good at talking to girls. At that moment, Ichikawa realized that right next to them was a police station. He was afraid of being caught for giving someone a ride on his bike and worried that the information, Yamada is hanging out with a lonely guy, would spread, causing her to stop being a model. Just as he was about to tell her to get off the bike, Yamada suddenly asked, "Is Papiko more coffee-flavored or more sour?" When he answered that it was coffee-flavored, she commented that he was the type of person who was afraid of change. Those words made Ichikawa freeze, and so he ignored everything, continuing to ride when the light turned green. After getting off the bike, Yamada asked, "Was it heavy carrying me?" He blushed and answered no. Surprisingly, she gave him a Papiko. It was truly a strange thing. Ichikawa then took the lid, broke it in half, and gave it back to her, trying to wave goodbye. The next day, the teacher announced that snack wrappers had been found in the library trash bin, proving that some student had broken the rules. Meanwhile, the culprit was carefreely playing with eraser shavings like an elementary school student. Sure enough, the teacher specifically pointed to Yamada. She quickly denied, "I never threw anything into the trash, so it wasn't me," but she was immediately called to the teacher's room after school. Fortunately, the teacher was busy, so the issue was postponed until the next week. However, no more snacks for her, which meant she wouldn't be going to the library anymore. Ichikawa felt a bit disappointed. On Sunday, his sister invited him to the restaurant, so he lost a whole day of rest. He told himself that if anyone saw him in this situation, he would be embarrassed to death. Just then, Yamada's group walked by, and she saw him. He was so embarrassed he wanted to hide in his pants. The three of them were discussing how they often got flirted with on the streets. But Yamada shook the chicken snack bag so hard that the sound drowned out their conversation. He couldn't eavesdrop anymore, and on top of that, his sister mocked him, "Eating only salad like this? Are you even going to grow?" Which made him so embarrassed that he just walked away. While waiting to buy something, Yamada unexpectedly walked up to him, immediately tapping him on the shoulder and asking, "Are you with your sister?" She even wanted to be friends with his sister, since she was an only child. After that, Yamada asked what he was planning to buy. When Ichikawa answered, "Shaken chicken," she immediately mimicked him. At this point, he noticed her outfit looked quite mature. But it turned out that Yamada wasn't carrying a wallet. Ichikawa suspected that she didn't come here to shop. Yamada replied, "I was planning to go to the bathroom." But clearly, the bathroom was upstairs, right? And so, she had to say goodbye to him. A second later, Ichikawa suddenly realized, she came down here just to talk to him, but he told himself, "No, it's probably just that Yamada doesn't know where the bathroom is," and then, for some reason, Ichikawa bought another ice cream, telling himself it wasn't because he thought she would like it. Just then, Yamada walked by. He hesitated, wanting to say something, but couldn't. In his mind, he thought, "Her scent is so pleasant." The first day of the week arrived. Ichikawa looked into the teacher's room but didn't see Yamada. Soon after, she unexpectedly appeared and asked him what he was doing. Ichikawa quickly made up an excuse, saying he was just passing by. If that's the case, Yamada wanted him to come in with her, because she was really scared that the teacher would get angry and bang the desk, accusing her of bringing snacks to school. However, before the teacher could finish his sentence, Ichikawa spoke up in defense of his friend. He used sharp reasoning and arguments to prove that Yamada had done nothing wrong. Afterward, he left with great presence. To his surprise, the homeroom teacher patted him on the back and praised him, saying that he had never seen Ichikawa speak so much before and was very happy. Having escaped the danger, Yamada happily thanked him, making Ichikawa blush. She wanted to give him a candy, extended her hand, and told him to choose. But clearly, there was only one candy in her hand. However, Ichikawa still chose the one that wasn't candy. By the way, Yamada also said, from now on, he should just call her Yamada, without any honorifics. That statement made Ichikawa's heart race. But he told himself it probably didn't mean anything special. The upcoming career exploration event was the upcoming career exploration event, where all the students would be divided into groups to visit companies and write reports. Ichikawa wanted to visit places like the Criminal Investigation Bureau or the Forensic Institute. But his biggest problem was, he had to form a group of 6 people with similar interests. Fortunately, the Adaki group invited him to join. Although he wasn't thrilled about it, it was better than nothing. However, upon further analysis, Yamada's group was also missing 2 people, and Hara's group was the same. So, Adaki and Kanzaki decided to split up, and it made more sense for them to join their groups. The 4 of them headed toward Yamada's group, but as soon as she saw Adaki, she immediately declined, wanting only to choose Ichikawa and Kanzaki. Adaki then revealed that Kanzaki wanted to join Hara's group, making Kanzaki quickly signal him to shut up. If that's the case, they would discuss whom to choose from the 4 of them. Ichikawa thought to himself, there's no way I'll be chosen. After the discussion, Adaki was the first to be eliminated, because no one wanted to have him in their group. Next was Kanzaki, who had 3 options, but he hesitated, not wanting to directly say that he wanted to be with Hara. Yamada understood and wanted to help him, but she didn't know what to do. So, they had to ask Ichikawa for help. He remarked that Kanzaki was very diligent and had high scores, so he would fit better with the other group. But this guy accidentally let something slip, making it sound like Yamada's group was being insulted for being dumb. Even though Mika ranked 5th in the whole grade on top of that. Adaki and Ota also seized the chance to join this group, because both of them were bad at studying. But Ichikawa wasn't going to give up, and bragged about his science test where he only scored 40 points. To prove that he was worse at studying. So, Ichikawa and Adaki were chosen for the group. However, it seems that only Yamada realized that Ichikawa lied about his score, because she knew he always scored near perfect marks. The conversation in the library. Standing in the library, Ichikawa thought to himself, I wonder if Yamada will realize that I want to join her group? At that moment, he suddenly saw Yamada and Hara walking in. Yamada even tried to pull her friend along to snack with her. But Hara refused because she was on a diet. Immediately, Yamada made a happy face because she didn't have to share her food anymore. However, Hara wondered because Kanzaki once said he liked chubby figures. Then why go on a diet? But Hara still didn't believe it, thinking he only liked cute girls. So she felt like she had no chance at all. Hara whispered that she and Kanzaki had once hung out and shopped together. But right after that, she screamed loudly, because she was so excited to talk about romance with her friends. Yamada, on the other hand, liked to listen to her friends' love stories, but had never had a boyfriend herself. Hearing that, Ichikawa breathed a sigh of relief. When asked what she would like to do with her boyfriend, Yamada answered that she would like to sit next to each other and share one pair of headphones, and then take a picture together. However, out of habit, to make her face look slimmer, Hara stepped back when the picture was being taken. Later, when she opened the photo they just took, Hara panicked, thinking there was a ghost behind the bookshelf. And so Ichikawa was caught eavesdropping the whole time. But fortunately, both of them trusted that he wouldn't reveal anything. Hara wondered, how long have you two been here together? Seeing Ichikawa's awkward expression while explaining, it seemed like her friend had misunderstood a lot of things. Yamada just wanted to go buy food. She suddenly challenged him. Do you think I like mint chocolate? But before Ichikawa could answer, she quickly concluded, time's up. This was a reflex test. After saying that, she handed Ichikawa an ice cream bar. Quickly, he accepted it, and at that moment, he was sure his heart had caught a terminal illness. And that illness was liking Yamada. However, just a few steps away, she suddenly called him back and said, I really like it. That sentence made Ichikawa's face turn bright red. To avoid any misunderstanding, he shouted, you mean you like mint chocolate, right? Finally, the day for the career orientation trip arrived. While everyone was waiting in line, Yamada kept running around looking for snack stalls. Her friend Chihiro had to follow closely to manage her 24/7. As for the main character, Ichikawa couldn't talk to the girls, so he only chatted with Adaki. But this guy just keeps ogling girls and saying perverted things. The place the group visited today was a manga publishing company. Everyone started the tour from the editor's office. Adaki struck up a conversation with Yamada by asking, do you read manga? She replied. No. Adaki immediately responded, me neither, but then Yamada suddenly recognized one of her colleagues, whose photo was posted on the board. Adaki quickly caught on and said, "I really like her, especially those huge melons," but all he got in return was a look of disdain from Yamada and a stomp from Chihiro. After that, he turned back to chat with the other two girls. But just from listening, it was clear how little those three knew about manga. Next, their guide showed them a bunch of cool things, like the original manuscripts of a Baki series. Deep inside, Ichikawa really wanted to see them, but of course, he wouldn't dare to show it. Yamada noticed this. She took his hand, pulled him closer, and told the others to move aside. Ichikawa's eyes lit up as he gazed at the incredibly detailed illustrations. Without thinking, he turned to Yamada and said, "Isn't this amazing?" His words left her completely stunned. At the end of the tour, the guide asked if anyone had any questions, but Adaki immediately blurted out something perverted, making everyone ignore him. At that moment, 8 people were crammed into an elevator, making it feel a bit tight. As a result, Yamada ended up standing very close to Ichikawa. Right in front of him was a pair of heavenly assets. Below that were her smooth, pale thighs. Ichikawa had no idea where to look, so he decided to shut his eyes tightly. However, his other senses were still working just fine. His nose picked up her scent. His ears caught every breath she took. And most importantly, something inside him was awakening. The rise of Excalibur. Finally, when they reached their floor, Ichikawa opened his eyes and was startled. Everyone else had already left. Yamada was still standing close to him. She seemed to be distracted by something that had caught her attention. But right after, she quickly walked away. After the tour conversation, out of nowhere, Yamada asked, "Do you read a lot of manga?" Ichikawa replied, "Just a little more than the average person." She kept staring into his eyes while listening to him list a few series from the publishing company. Yamada, on the other hand, had only ever read one series. When Yamada found out that Ichikawa hadn't read it, she invited him to borrow it together sometime. But Chihiro chimed in, "I don't think he'd be into sweet, cutesy stories like that." Ichikawa excused himself to the restroom, thinking angrily, "They're probably saying I'm a gloomy guy who secretly likes cute stories." But then he reconsidered, the Yamada I like wouldn't say something like that. Afterward, the two suddenly realized that everyone else had already left. They had been so caught up in their conversation that Yamada forgot to let the others know. The two of them hurried to the train station. But unfortunately, the train doors had just closed and it pulled away. Yamada lowered her head apologetically. But Ichikawa didn't blame her at all. On the contrary, he was actually thrilled to be alone with his crush. But when he saw her on the verge of tears, he quickly reassured her. The next train comes in just 7 minutes, he thought to himself. She must be embarrassed to be alone with someone like me. That's why she's crying. To break the awkwardness, Ichikawa went to buy a bottle of milk tea. Then, blushing, handed it to her. Yamada looked surprised as she took the drink from him. Ichikawa said, "It was my fault for going to the restroom. If I had loudly told everyone back then, this wouldn't have happened." Imagining Ichikawa standing in the middle of the group, confidently announcing his restroom break, Yamada burst into laughter. The next train arrived, packed with people. Ichikawa stepped forward a little to find a spot. But Yamada pulled him closer. "What if we get separated again?" Ichikawa thought to himself. This trip was amazing. Suddenly, Yamada clung tightly to his backpack and whispered, "Do you think Hara and Kanzaki are dating?" She continued, "Dating a classmate seems fun, especially if it's a secret." Then, out of nowhere, she asked, "What about you?" Ichikawa was startled but could only manage a soft, yeah." Finally, the two of them caught up with the group. And now, Yamada was holding a piece of fried chicken. Chihiro apologized for being the group leader but failing to notice that the group had split up. Yamada pulled her into a hug and gently reassured her, "Everyone makes mistakes. It's not your fault at all, my dear friend." The next day at home, Ichikawa kept talking about the career exploration tour. His older sister groaned, "You already told me about it yesterday," seeing how weirdly excited her little brother was. She shot him a suspicious glance. On his way to school, Ichikawa told himself that school wasn't fun for him. But when he thought about Yamada, he couldn't help but wonder, could it be because I like her? As he pushed his bike to the school gate, he noticed Yamada standing there for a while, assuming she was waiting for someone. He quietly walked past her. But unexpectedly, Yamada grabbed his bike and said, "Good morning," then. The two of them walked into the parking garage together. She took out the manga she had mentioned yesterday and handed it to Ichikawa. To his surprise, Yamada was serious about lending it to him. "But please, don't get too excited and accidentally spoil the whole story." As they walked into the classroom together, Ichikawa asked, "Aren't you waiting for someone?" Yamada flinched, hesitated a little, but then slowly stepped back and headed toward the school gate. At the end of the day, she was busy with something and couldn't go to the library. Ichikawa returned to his usual way of relaxing. But unexpectedly, Yamada appeared again. She was quite surprised to see Ichikawa sitting on a bench. "I remember you said before that you think better when you're standing, right?" Realizing that Ichikawa hadn't read the manga she gave him yet, Yamada urged, "Hurry up and read it." She grabbed his horror manga. But due to a misstep, she slipped and fell toward Ichikawa. They crashed into each other. And by accident, her steamed bun landed on his face. Both of them quickly apologized to each other. Before leaving, Yamada waved goodbye. Ichikawa called out, "Yamada," but a second later, he thought, "Wait, why did I call her?" Blushing, he awkwardly asked, "Are you coming to school tomorrow?" Then immediately wondered, "Why did I even ask that?" Yamada beamed and replied, "Of course, I promise I'll come to the library, now." Ichikawa had realized that he actually liked going to school. That night, he opened the romance novel and wondered, "I wonder how she reads this." He tried lying in different positions to see which one made the most sense. Thinking it over, he figured she must read while eating the next day at school. Yamada asked again, "Have you read it?" But unfortunately, he hadn't been able to focus. So he still hadn't read it. That scene was accidentally witnessed by Adaki. Even in class, he couldn't concentrate. Ichikawa went to sit at the stairwell to read, only to be startled when Adaki suddenly appeared. Curious, Adaki asked, "How can you talk so naturally with Yamada?" Ichikawa thought to himself, "It's over. From now on, my life will be filled with bullying." But no, Adaki just wanted to ask, "Does she like anyone yet?" Thinking that the two were close, Adaki hoped Ichikawa would know. Ichikawa answered, "No." Adaki let out a sigh of relief, then confessed, "Actually, I like Yamada." He said it seriously, not out of attraction, but out of genuine feelings. That confession left Ichikawa stunned. "So, does that mean I don't actually like Yamada? Was it just desire?" But when Adaki started listing the things he liked about Yamada, her face, her chest, her legs, Ichikawa felt irritated. So in the end, he only likes her appearance. "But I know so much more about Yamada than that." He didn't understand why he got so annoyed whenever guys said dirty things about her. As he walked into class, Ichikawa saw Yamada happily chatting with her friends. And without a care, she plopped herself right onto his desk. With no other choice, Ichikawa sat down like usual. But then, she casually lifted her leg. At that moment, everything became clear to him. "I'm just looking at Yamada with lustful eyes too. Could it be that I don't actually like her?" But today, his world came crashing down when the library staff posted a sign at the entrance, "No eating or drinking in the library." Both of them wondered, did someone snitch? How did their little snack sessions get exposed? Or maybe some other culprit had been caught eating there without them knowing. Their only option was to ask the library staff directly. And when they got their answer, that a candy wrapper had been found inside, Yamada's explosive reaction instantly gave away the real culprit. Back at his seat, Ichikawa felt a pang in his chest. Because today was her last day at the library. He told himself it was fine. Just a coincidence, nothing more. But who would have thought? Yamada pulled out a chocolate bar and started eating. As if nothing had ever happened. She really doesn't learn her lesson at that moment. Ichikawa suddenly noticed someone standing behind the bookshelf. It was none other than the librarian, and right in Yamada's hand, a piece of candy. About to go into her mouth. The situation was critical. Without thinking, Ichikawa sprang up and grabbed her hand. The scene made the librarian assume they were just flirting. So she quietly walked away. While Yamada stared at him in confusion, Ichikawa quickly explained that he only did it to fool the teacher. But alas, the chocolate had already melted all over his hand. Yamada immediately shooed him away. But just as he turned around, he heard a slurping sound. Turns out, she couldn't let it go to waste. so she licked it off. Ichikawa could only shake his head and advised her to drop her snacking habits. He had already prepared himself for the end of this library routine. But to his surprise, the next day, Yamada was right back in her usual spot this time. She was actually doing homework. Yes, homework, except her definition of homework was eating only 2/3 of what she usually did. Not quitting entirely. For some reason, seeing that made Ichikawa feel happy. By the way, today he was also curious about who had thrown the candy wrapper in the trash. Without missing a beat, Yamada replied, "You, obviously," and began to recount the story. The other day, she had handed him a snack wrapper. But Ichikawa clearly didn't throw it in the trash. Instead, he wrapped it up and took it home. Wait, did he just slip up that night? Ichikawa sat at home searching for Yamada's name online. While browsing her pictures, he accidentally stumbled upon some offensive keywords. This made him upset. But what surprised him more was that Yamada had actually appeared on a TV show, which aired every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Well, it's fate, it's tonight, so he hurriedly rushed downstairs to turn on the TV. But just as his sister asked, "What are you watching?" it was too late. So he had no choice but to sulk back to his room. Even though Ichikawa knew that he liked Yamada, he had no intention of dating or becoming her boyfriend. Everything seemed fine just the way it was. During gym class, Yamada stuck close behind him. Ichikawa told himself, "As a man, I can't lose." However, the faster he ran, the faster she followed. It seemed like Yamada wanted to say something, but he couldn't understand her intentions. So he just kept running faster. When Yamada took off her jacket to cool off, for some reason, a mysterious force seemed to come into play. This made Ichikawa want to slow down. It turned out, he wanted to check if she was a good person or not. Ichikawa reminded Yamada that her gym shirt was on inside out. She immediately pulled her arms in and turned around to fix it, even though it was very cold. Today, our main character told himself he couldn't wear a jacket because he'd look like a pervert. Suddenly, the teacher called Adaki to come up and solve a problem. Ichikawa realized that if Adaki stood on the podium looking down, he would see his name printed on Yamada's shirt. Without thinking, he quickly raised his hand. "Teacher, I'll do this one." Little did he know, this action accidentally saved Adaki's life. Because he didn't know how to solve the problem, Adaki stood at the podium, trying to signal Yamada to look at his chest. But she only looked at Ichikawa and smiled. That was frustrating. Adaki even thought Ichikawa was trying to act cool after finishing the exercise, but unfortunately doing it wrong. Ichikawa was laughed at by the whole class to the point where he felt like crawling into his pants. As soon as class ended, Yamada stretched out her chest to relax, which made Ichikawa feel extremely pressured. Ichikawa always tried to find opportunities to get close to her, but at lunchtime, Yamada went with her friends instead. Suddenly, she signaled for him to go with her to the infirmary. It turned out, Yamada had realized she wore her shirt inside out, so she went in to take it off before returning it. And she even took the opportunity to secretly sniff it. Yamada wondered why Ichikawa wasn't wearing a jacket and wasn't cold. She calmly replied that she didn't feel anything. But thinking back, from class to lunchtime, she never once looked down at her shirt. So when did she realize she wore it inside out? Ichikawa didn't dare think too deeply. Then suddenly noticed a grain of rice stuck to his shirt. Immediately, he diverted the attention by suggesting they measure their height. However, the height measuring tool was a bit tricky to use, and Yamada kept fumbling with it. Ichikawa held his breath, not daring to exhale too loudly, as if some unseen force was stopping her. Finally, Yamada decided to just measure it with her hands. As a result, Ichikawa collapsed immediately when it was Yamada's turn. She had to stand on the chair to measure her height at 1.72 meters. She wanted him to measure it again, but Ichikawa stubbornly refused. The two of them struggled, and Yamada accidentally jumped to the side and knocked over the scale. She quickly covered it in a flash, then asked him if he saw anything. Ichikawa replied that he did, but Yamada firmly refused to believe him. So all the secrets were out since realizing that he liked Yamada. Nothing had changed for Ichikawa, because she didn't know. His friends were discussing how Yamada would be starring in a movie. Even Ichikawa realized, after hearing the director's name and the co-actors, that this was a life-changing opportunity for anyone. But he noticed that Yamada's face didn't look happy. Maybe she was feeling pressured. Today was the day for seat changes. And all the students had to draw lots. For Ichikawa, this was an event that required praying to the gods for mercy. Yamada carried her desk and sat near him. But in the end, they were still separated by one desk. Which really killed his mood. Especially since Adaki got to sit next to her, while Ichikawa's seatmate turned out to be Hara. But a big problem arose. Yamada was too tall. And he couldn't see the board clearly. Still, there was something even more distracting. Her eyelashes were so long. Just as he was sneakily looking at her, Yamada suddenly turned around, smiled, and then turned away. Ichikawa wanted to explain that it was just by accident Adaki forgot his literature textbook. Yamada immediately let him borrow her book to share. But our guy wasn't one to back down. He quickly pulled out a different book from Adaki's desk. But no matter how hard he tried, Ichikawa still couldn't see the board. When he tilted his head to get a better view, he accidentally leaned against Hara. He quickly apologized, but Hara just moved the desk closer so they could share notes. For some reason, Yamada glanced down, then sulkily asked, "Looks like you're having fun?" And then she turned away during break. His friends called Yamada over. But she scolded, "You guys come here instead." Ichikawa really couldn't understand. Could it be that she was upset because she didn't want to join the movie Lost in Thought? Yamada suddenly asked, "Is it fun sitting next to Hara? She's so gentle and easygoing." Then she lowered her voice and added, "And she's cute too." Ichikawa blushed after hearing that. But during the next class, his eyes were only on Yamada. He thought that the way she looked just now, mouth agape in surprise, and her eyes wide open, seemed to have snapped her out of something. Ichikawa intended to explain that it was because she was blocking the board. But he realized his words sounded more like flirting. So, he got stuck, unable to say anything else. And Yamada blushed while looking at him. Finally, both of them awkwardly turned their heads in opposite directions. At that moment, Hara came over to announce that she had asked the teacher to switch Ichikawa's seat, so he could see the board more clearly. At the library, Ichikawa guessed that Yamada had a lot to worry about with the movie. But suddenly, she brightened up, as if she had been waiting for him to ask about her role. When he asked what role she was playing, Yamada excitedly shared that she was playing the daughter of a police officer who is pursuing the main character. But the more she talked, the more happy and lively she seemed. Maybe no one had ever really cared about her role before Yamada even recited a line from the movie for him. "You're really disgusting." This line sounded like she was directly insulting him. To practice better, she turned his face toward hers and repeatedly said the line. However, since there were still many people in the library, Ichikawa wanted to move somewhere quieter. For some reason, Yamada led him into the storage room, where it was just the two of them. The space was very cramped, which made Ichikawa feel quite awkward. Speaking about the movie's release date, it had just started filming, so it would probably be about 2 years before it premiered. Ichikawa thought to himself, by then, I wonder if she and I will still be together by then? Suddenly, Yamada lowered her voice and asked, "Will you go see it?" Ichikawa answered, "I don't know, but if he could, he definitely would watch it again." Hearing this, Yamada gasped in surprise, then immediately turned her face away. He asked, "What about practicing the lines?" But she only said, "That's more than enough." That evening, Ichikawa made sure to watch the show with Yamada. However, her face only appeared a few times. Sometimes it was just a shot of her looking at someone, or a scene where she smiled at a few dull jokes. She didn't even make it into the frame because of her height. And so, the program ended without her saying a single word, even though he had waited all week. When Ichikawa saw this, he felt a sense of relief, only to blame himself for having bad thoughts. The next day, in class, Yamada asked the others, "Did anyone watch me on the program last night?" It turned out, she wasn't bothered at all, and was even more playful than usual. Today, Chihiro was absent due to a cold, and Yamada looked visibly disappointed. It turned out, it was because no one was left for her to sit on. Ichikawa thought to himself, if that group all stays home, would she need someone else to be her seat? Suddenly, he heard a pop sound. Yamada had slapped his back. It startled her, and she jumped up. Ichikawa could only sit and count the numbers, to forget the scene he had just accidentally seen. The girls then switched to doodling on the board. A moment later, Adaki was about to go erase it because it was his turn for the duty today. But suddenly, Ichikawa wanted to go erase it for him. It seemed like part of the reason was that he wanted to see more clearly the drawing Yamada had just made. Today, Chihiro had returned to school. Yamada bragged to her friend that her recent test scores were above average, and that she had also done all her homework. It turned out that recently, she often sat in the library during break time to do her homework. Hearing that, Chihiro also brought her books to study, and Ichikawa helped her with the lessons. She praised him for being a good teacher, probably thanks to his skills in the data processing club. It turned out that Yamada had talked a lot about Ichikawa to her friends. Chihiro asked, "Doesn't it bother you that my friend comes here every day? She's really eccentric." She even told the story of the other day when they went to get ice cream, because her hands were full of other things. Yamada decided to slam the ice cream stick right onto her face. It's so confusing, but right at that moment, Chihiro suddenly realized Ichikawa had just laughed. Chihiro immediately moved closer to see, but Yamada quickly pulled her away, because she had seen him laugh a few times already. Not only that, Chihiro also noticed that Ichikawa was speaking very casually, while he usually hesitated when talking to girls. Then the dreadful parent-teacher meeting day arrived. Before anything else, Adaki was already being scolded by his mother for his test scores. Ichikawa was trying to avoid his mother as much as possible. Suddenly, he realized that Yamada was sitting next to her mother. Indeed, both mother and daughter had kind hearts just like each other. Yamada's mother seemed very strict, reminding her to pay attention to every little thing, from her sitting posture and beyond, even though she couldn't keep it up for long. When Yamada realized that the person sitting next to her was Ichikawa's mother, she was overjoyed. Ichikawa's mother hoped that Yamada could befriend her son, but it seemed that was a bit difficult. For some reason, Yamada started stammering, unlike usual, when she talked about how she and Ichikawa had spoken quite a lot. When she learned that recently, Ichikawa seemed very happy to come to school, Yamada was both surprised and pleased. She wanted to give Ichikawa's mother a candy, but in return, Yamada also wanted to give her one of hers. Seeing that her own mother didn't seem to like it, Ichikawa's mother explained, "It's just a throat lozenge, so don't worry." Yamada seemed to be very fond of his friend's mother. At the end of the parent-teacher meeting, this was the first time Ichikawa's mother was so happy, because the teacher praised him for raising his hand to answer questions recently. She mentioned that a beautiful girl had given her a candy, but she forgot to ask her name. Ichikawa immediately answered, "That was Yamada," but he didn't know she was walking right behind him. Surprised by his words, Yamada immediately left with a red face. The next day, Yamada complimented Ichikawa's mother, calling her cute, and asked, "What do you usually call your mom?" But getting so close to him like that made our main character unable to focus on answering. He stood up again, trying to keep a distance like before. At this moment, Jamwa said, "Chihiro had started extra lessons at home, so instead of being lazy, you should study with a nervous tone." Ichikawa flipped open a few pages of his thick notebook and continued, "She always uses this to measure how dumb I am." Suddenly realizing that Ichikawa had just laughed, Yamada felt really happy. On the table at that moment, there was a candy from Yamada. But just then, the library teacher appeared, and praised them for studying hard. Ichikawa broke into a cold sweat. Meanwhile, Yamada still didn't realize what was happening. He quietly tapped her on the shoulder and whispered, "Hide the candy." But he didn't expect that this would surprise her so much that she turned bright red, and then hit her head on the ground. Luckily, our guy managed to quickly hide the candy before the teacher noticed. Our main character still didn't understand what was going on, not realizing that it was a sensitive spot for Yamada. Thinking it was just a light drizzle, Ichikawa foolishly didn't bring an umbrella. But in the end, it turned into a heavy downpour. Accidentally caught by Yamada on the way, she remarked, "Looks like we've swapped positions this time." Huh? In Ichikawa's mind, all he could think was, "I must look disgusting right now." To his surprise, Yamada touched his cheek, turning his face toward hers. She had an idea. Put a plastic bag on his head. How can you be so silly? If that were the case, she would sit on the bike seat to shield him with an umbrella. Although she really wanted to do this, she declined because she was afraid it would be dangerous and didn't want to make him late. Once they got home, Feeling cold, Ichikawa realized that Yamada had left something in his bike basket. It was a pack of sanitary pads. He suddenly realized that it seemed like Yamada needed it, so he quickly rode back to her. As soon as he saw her, he immediately called her name and handed her the bag. In response, Yamada took out a towel and wiped his head. He wondered, why rush to return this bag to me now, instead of just giving it to me tomorrow? Yamada understood that he had seen what was inside the bag, and whispered, "It's not that it's my time. It's for my mom." Before they said goodbye, Ichikawa asked, "Is your work going well?" This question made Yamada pause, with some thoughts crossing her mind. Back home, Ichikawa scrolled through pictures of her for a bit, then slowly drifted off to sleep. Suddenly waking up, Ichikawa realized he had caught a cold, so he decided to skip school today, planning to enjoy a quiet day at home by himself. He suddenly heard a knock at the door. At first, he planned to ignore it, but when he peeked through the door and saw Yamada, he immediately rushed to call her back. She handed him the ice cream from lunch at school, and apologized for making Ichikawa stand in the rain yesterday. He wondered, "Isn't it far from your house to here?" But Yamada just smiled and said she didn't mind at all, even though they had already said goodbye. After a few seconds of thinking, Ichikawa wanted to invite her in for tea. She happily agreed. Now, he couldn't calm down with his crush present in his house. So much so that when he poured water, he splashed it all over himself, worried that he might smell bad. Deciding to change into something a bit newer, he went into the changing room, but gradually his head started to spin, and then Ichikawa collapsed onto the floor. After waiting for a while and not seeing him, Yamada daringly went up to his room. Seeing the scene in front of her, she hurriedly ran in to help him sit on the bed, then picked up his shirt and put it on him. In his dazed state, Ichikawa didn't understand why Yamada was standing so close to him, to the point where he accidentally leaned into her chest. "Maybe this is the most real dream I've ever had." Yamada also immediately wrapped her arms around him and rested her head on his. Until he woke up, Ichikawa held her hand, calling out Yamada's name, but unfortunately, it was his older sister by this time. It was already dark. His sister noticed a jar of strawberry ice cream and a note on the living room table. "Get well soon." This meant that Yamada visiting him today was not a dream. Suddenly today, Yamada awkwardly asked if Ichikawa used line, making him think he was being bullied. He reluctantly replied that he used it a little, which made her laugh. "You sound like you're talking about a drink." After thinking for a moment, she found this sticker interesting, and wanted to send it to him, but our main character refused. This made her feel downcast. She continued her attack by mentioning the line group for the class. Asking if the data handling club had a line group, Ichikawa replied that he didn't know. Java then suggested, "Then just ask them." However, the club was quite small, and her friend became discouraged, lying down despondently on the table. But then, the last day of school finally came, and she completely forgot. Tomorrow would be the start of winter break, so Yamada wanted to meet somewhere to give him a book. Her friends invited her to hang out, but she declined to finish her work. Taking this opportunity, she wanted to exchange line contacts with Ichikawa. Our protagonist could only blush. Could it be, "I'm allowed to give myself some hope"? Eventually, he received his first message from her. Yamada seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, her face looking very happy. It was already dark. Yamada apologized for making Ichikawa accompany her the entire day. At that moment, he realized she had actually been very worried about today. Yet, he hadn't noticed. Only thinking about himself, he then moved closer. And instead of using "I" like usual, this time, Ichikawa used "I" in a more casual way. Embarrassed, he said, "I'm not the type to be easy to approach. Nor am I the type to avoid rejecting others. If I don't like something, I'll just say I don't like it, and I won't hesitate to say harsh words like drop dead. So I just want to say that I've had a lot of fun." Yamada handed him a towel. And since he used "I" in a more casual way, she understood that Ichikawa had enjoyed himself too. It was late by the time they returned. The streets were empty, almost no one around. They still held hands, neither of them wanting to let go. They walked slowly, trying to stretch the moment a little longer. Occasionally, their eyes met accidentally, and they hurriedly looked away. Feeling shy, Ichikawa was no longer trailing behind like usual. but was walking alongside her. He feared Yamada might notice his feelings. Finally, when they reached the turning point, it was Yamada who let go of his hand first. Ichikawa meant to wish her a happy new year, but Yamada laughed, saying it was still a few days away. They turned their backs and started to leave. But just after a few seconds, Ichikawa turned his head back. Yamada suddenly appeared from behind a streetlight, and in a Santa Claus voice, she wished him a Merry Christmas. The holy night no longer mattered. He just wanted to shout that he liked her. When he got home, his sister invited him to go to the shrine, but Ichikawa refused, saying he had to return a few books. While distracted by the gift he was planning to give, he was startled to run into Yamada, who was in casual home clothes, walking her dog. Even though they had planned to meet at that spot, he didn't expect to run into her earlier. He couldn't help but comment that Yamada's choice of dog name was really bad. She asked if he was going to the shrine for the new year, and for some reason, he answered, "I went with my family already." Yamada was really happy to hear that, and even wanted to set up another time and place to meet. Ichikawa went to the shrine with his family. His plan was to ask for permission to separate later to meet Yamada as planned. But somehow, she had already been waiting in front of him for who knows how long. His sister asked, "Does she have a boyfriend?" Because she was dressed so well, and kept looking at herself in the mirror and practicing her smile. Maybe Yamada was standing there waiting for the person she loved. Ichikawa didn't dare to meet his friend at that moment, but his sister kept pushing him toward her, and Yamada had already noticed him. She immediately ran over, introduced herself to his parents, and asked if she could join them. At the praying spot, Ichikawa couldn't even clasp his hands, because he was injured. Seeing this, Yamada placed her hand over his, hoping that their wish would come true. Hearing her warm, soft whispering voice beside his ear, our protagonist almost couldn't hold himself together. Afterward, they said their goodbyes. Ichikawa went with his family. But after walking for a while, his sister immediately pulled him aside, chasing after that girl. Finally, they found Yamada. He called out her name loudly, and saw she was holding a bunch of fried chicken. His sister, very bold, invited the girl over to their house, making Ichikawa panic. Yamada quickly swallowed a piece of chicken and hurriedly agreed. His sister seemed quite fascinated by her, so she curiously asked, "Who are you waiting for?" Yamada gave a vague answer. No one. Now recalling, it seemed like she had wanted to invite Ichikawa to eat. Wait, does this mean my little brother has a chance? When they arrived at the house, Yamada took off her leather jacket, revealing a dog-shaped keychain. Oh no, trouble was brewing the other day. Ichikawa had lied, saying he only bought a pair of them with his sister. If she saw this now, everything would be ruined. As soon as they entered the living room, he quickly covered the keychain with his hand. His sister saw it and thought her younger brother was being bold and rushing things. But in the end, she only noticed Yamada's overly big soul. Yamada was invited to eat some soup, but she got some on her cheek, which made Ichikawa think Yamada was really cute. However, his sister didn't just think that. She bluntly said out loud, "You're really cute." "That's cruel," his sister then asked. "I bet everyone calls you cute, right?" Yamada nodded in agreement, making Ichikawa nearly choke. Then, he was pressured with another question. "Do you know their first name?" Yamada immediately turned to look at him, eagerly waiting for an answer. After a moment of awkwardness, Ichikawa quietly mumbled, "Kyutaro." He was under so much pressure he could only push his older sister away to escape the awkward situation. Next, everyone looked at the photo album. His sister took out pictures of Ichikawa when he was a child for Yamada to see. She flipped through the pages, exclaiming how cute he was, making him cover his face in embarrassment. Back in elementary school, Ichikawa sat next to his friends. But in middle school, he always sat next to the teacher. In particular, he had never participated in any extracurricular activities, so there were no commemorative photos. Yamada glanced over and saw that Ichikawa was starting to feel very uncomfortable. Just then, his sister suddenly remembered she had plans to hang out with her friends. So she said goodbye to the two of them. Well, that made it convenient for Yamada to head home as well. Just as Ichikawa was about to leave the door, he accidentally overheard his sister thanking Yamada. "Thank you for being willing to be friends with my little brother." Yamada immediately asked if she could call her sister from now on. Upon hearing this, Both the sister and the younger brother were completely shocked. Later, when they returned to the door of the house, Yamada realized that Ichikawa still had a keychain from his bag with him. She went into the kitchen to wash the dishes she had just eaten from. Now, only the two of them were left alone together. Ichikawa took the albums upstairs to put them away, but for some reason, Yamada followed him around. Moreover, she casually plopped down on the bed as if it were completely normal. Actually, Yamada had seen pictures of Ichikawa before. In elementary school, he attended the same school as Chihiro, and Yamada had been shown the pictures by her friend. Now, thinking back, he remembered that incident. Yesterday, Ichikawa had accidentally done something in his room, so he was worried the smell might still linger. He peeked into the trash can and saw that it had already been emptied. What a stroke of luck! Yamada even purposely sat a little to the side, wanting him to sit next to her to chat. On Ichikawa's shelf were many awards, from essay contests and science research competitions, and he even had a national prize. It seemed like he had once been at the peak of his achievements. But now, Yamada accidentally stumbled upon a file about a murder crime. She blushed in panic, not because she was scared, but because she thought it was incredibly cool. It was the kind of stuff related to psychology that she liked. She flopped onto the bed, then turned to ask, "Do you want to try reading your mind?" But when she accidentally swung her hand, she grabbed a magazine that had been hidden under the bed. Immediately, Ichikawa stopped her hand. He couldn't let Yamada find out he bought a magazine with her picture on it, but he had been careless, creating a truly awkward situation. The two of them were face to face, so close that they both turned red. Yamada breathed heavily, her eyes spinning as if she didn't understand what had just happened. Finally, she quickly pushed him away, apologizing for invading his private things too much. But for some reason, before leaving, Yamada still tried to take a picture of Ichikawa when he was a child just like that. She quickly ran down to the first floor, promising next time she would show Ichikawa her album, with a mischievous grin on her face. So, wasn't Yamada kind of inviting him to her house to hang out? Ichikawa suddenly remembered back to their elementary school graduation, when the two best friends had promised to always hang out together. Even though they would no longer be in the same school, he had agreed, and that turned out to be the last time they talked. When he entered the new school, his classmates wanted to talk to him, but when they saw Ichikawa reading a crime file, they got a little scared and avoided him. Suddenly, Ichikawa snapped awake, realizing it had all just been a dream. But there was still one question that bothered him. When would he finally let go of all these scary things in reality? There was someone who understood him. Ichikawa's goal was not to scare others, but to expose everything inside his heart. Because of an injury on his hand, he was driven to school by his mother in the car. But what a shock! Yamada suddenly hid behind the car and jumped out to scare him after saying goodbye to his mother and his friend's sister. She followed him closely, observing him. It turned out she was looking for the dog-shaped keychain. If that was the case, Ichikawa must have kept it in his bag, so Yamada ended up hanging it around his neck. She even came closer, gently adjusting his button for him. Afterward, she quickly turned away, trying to hide her expression. Ichikawa suddenly recalled a series of memories, from the day he quietly watched her from afar in class, to gradually becoming closer and closer. He found it all so strange. A year ago, he didn't even want to go to school, always finding ways to lie and avoid school events. But now, things were different. After stammering for a while, Ichikawa finally said, "Maybe it's because of you." But Yamada disagreed. "You should thank yourself instead. If you hadn't come to class in the first place, you wouldn't have been able to talk to me or the other friends." At that moment, Ichikawa's books suddenly fell out of his bag. Yamada picked them up to help him. In Ichikawa's mind, a series of thoughts exploded, and his face turned bright red. Suddenly, Yamada rushed over and hugged him. The books fell down again, but she didn't care. She gently rubbed his head, encouraging him. Ichikawa realized he had just said everything he had been thinking. His hand instinctively wrapped around Yamada, hugging her back, and then, Ichikawa started to cry. "Thank you for everything." The two of them stood there, hugging, in a beautiful moment. As a result, they almost ended up being late for school. Michael also arrived at school and saw the two of them acting strangely, but it seemed like she didn't realize what was going on. and just ran off without a second thought. Yamada gave Ichikawa a pack of chips. But when he opened it, it was just the empty wrapper. Just kidding tilde. She opened her other hand, giving him a piece of candy. Today's video ends here. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to support Oni-chan in the upcoming videos. Thank you for watching. Love you always.